occasions when Islamic radicals gained power, including in Iran after 1979, Sudan after 1989, most of Afghanistan after 1996, most of Somalia after 1999, and parts of Iraq in the mid-2000s. These groups ruled in an intolerant, uncompromising, and dictatorial manner. Indeed, their doing so contributed to the rise of local opposition against them. Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and similar movements have given little reason for anyone to believe that they would behave any more moderately in future as they attempt to gain power or actually do so. And those whom the Islamic radicals oppress are potential allies against them, as was demonstrated in late 2001 when so many Afghans joined with a relatively small number of American troops in toppling the Taliban, something that really, in retrospect, seems quite remarkable considering the difficulties we're having now. Finally, the prospects for divisions within the ranks of the Islamic radicals should not be discounted, especially because these are both highly likely to occur and highly significant when they do. In Iraq, we've already witnessed how radical Sunnis and radical Shias often fight each other, despite their common opposition to the American military presence. There have also been other examples of Sunni-Shia hostility. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the Taliban regime in Afghanistan almost went to war in 1998. Radical Sunnis have repeatedly attacked Shia communities in Pakistan. Al-Qaeda has criticized the radical Lebanese Shia movement Hezbollah. But in addition to these Sunni-Shia differences, there have also been differences between Shias and differences between Sunnis. For example, among the Shias, the chief Shia cleric in Iraq, Ayatollah Sistani, does not accept the principle of velayat-i-faqih that the Islamic Republic of Iran uses to justify the rule of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Similarly, there have been differences between Sunnis, as when Al-Qaeda criticized the radical movement Hamas for participating in elections in the occupied territories in 2006, and that it's having won them is no matter. And in my view, ironically, differences among radicals are likely to grow stronger if they perceive American influence in the region to be declining, and hence as being less of a common threat to them. And I just want to like to cite one recent example of this. To me, it hardly seems coincidental that after the initiation of the American withdrawal from Iraq and President Obama's announcement that the U.S. would begin withdrawing from Afghanistan, the virulently anti-American Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula leader Anwar al-Awlaki issued a warning to Sunni Arabs about the spread of Iranian influence into the Arabian Peninsula. Max Fisher wrote about this in The Atlantic in November of this past year. And Iran really could not be seen as a threat by al-Awlaki unless he believed that American power in the region is on the decline. And there are other examples of this as well. Right. The emergence of any, or especially any of these three trends that I've indicated, local opposition to Islamic radicals, intolerant behavior on the part of Islamic radicals believing themselves victorious, and divisions among Islamic radicals, in my view, will provide the U.S. and its allies with ample opportunity to work with others against radical Islamic forces in the future. It's not clear that we're going to see something akin to the collapse of communism, but I think that, what we've seen is that revolutionaries, when they think they've won, they tend to behave badly. And that this is an opportunity. Well, I'm hoping that I may have provided some food for thought and discussion. And in fact, what I'm really most interested in is hearing your reactions and comments to what I had to say. And so I hope that we can now open the floor to questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it. I was very interested by one of your first remarks about the sort of parallels between the Marxists of the past in the Middle East and the Islamists today. When I used to report in Syria, many of the former Marxists and socialists in Syria had very easily made that conversion to a hardcore Islamist and didn't see any irony at all in that switchover. But I guess my first question to you to open the floor would be about the parallels between the U.S. and Afghanistan and the Soviets in Afghanistan. As a Soviet expert, you can comment on this. Do you anticipate, or what are the parallels we might see between the U.S. exit from Afghanistan and what might happen in the wake and what was witnessed when the Soviets left?
Mm-hmm. Very, very good point. So I think that with the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, as well as with the U.S. withdrawal from Indochina, that what was the key thing in the collapse of the regimes that subsequently occurred in both cases was not so much the withdrawal, but as the later cutoff of arms supplies. In other words, that it's not clear, but the South Vietnamese weren't doing so badly, it seems to me, until the Congress in 1974 cut off all arms support to South Vietnam. Then it collapsed. Similarly, once the Soviets left Afghanistan by the beginning of 1989, that regime held on until at some point in 1992. But again, the key thing was that Soviet military support continued right up until the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then Yeltsin cut it off. Now, of course, at the time, that's what we wanted him to do, to cut it off, and the regime basically fell. And now I think that this is the key thing here with us as well. In other words, that if we leave Iraq, if we leave Afghanistan in particular, are we going to simply cease all military support? That, I think, would guarantee that the regime we're supporting is going to fall. Now, of course, even with military support, it may be having difficulties. But it strikes me that one of the problems of the Karzai regime is that it's being constantly second-guessed and undermined by Washington officialdom, and this makes it look illegitimate. If suddenly the Americans leave, and this is going to focus the mind on, well, just what is the alternative in this country, and we know what the alternative is like because they were here before, what we might see is, a greater degree of focusing the minds, either under Karzai or perhaps under a more capable leader. I'm not sure.
Thank you. We'll open the floor. For those of you in the overflow room, there should be question cards somewhere nearby. If you have any questions, you can write them out. If there aren't, somebody wave their hand and we'll get them to you. I believe Molly. And if you could state your name.
Molly Williamson, Middle East Institute. Thank you for a very thought-provoking presentation. Your response to the last question provokes a question on the impact of the economic recession globally, as countries, not only the United States, but countries in the neighborhood, potential contenders for being power brokers, all lick their economic wounds. What is the impact for the kind of choreography you see?
That's a very, very good question, and I'm not sure that I, have a definitive answer for that. I'm pretty sure I don't. I think what was interesting about the economic crisis of 2008 was that it almost completely drove Iraq and Afghanistan out of the headlines altogether. In other words, this is what this affects us. That we're not so worried about these other problems. And obviously, I think that economic downturn in America and the West is not going to make it more likely that we